Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppas with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome to the Human Conversation. This week I am speaking to Helen Pollock. I'm really excited about this because I don't really know Helen very well, and it's actually quite exciting when you have a conversation with someone that you don't know so well, because I don't know what we're going to find out. How lovely, listeners. So Helen's the director of Her Next Chapter. I love that name, Helen. She's a personal brand strategist, a business book coach, and a ghostwriter. Helen, sounds a bit spooky, doesn't it? Welcome to the Human Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Jules. I'm very much looking forward to having a human conversation.
Yes, me too. So I know my listeners, my regular listeners will probably know what I'm going to ask first, but it's always such a great place to start because obviously what you're doing at the moment is very book oriented. You know, I can hear the book stuff in there with the ghostwriting and the business book coach, but also there's this personal brand stuff in there too, which is very fascinating. So let's find out where this all started. Helen, tell us what you were going to do when you left school.
So my first ever work experience of any kind was at Vogue magazine.
No, that's so glamorous. I love that.
Do you know what? It's hilarious, really. But also, I'm a little bit impressed. Like 15-year-old me thought I want to write for a living. I fancy journalism. What's a really big name publication? Vogue.
Great.
Now, I'm not particularly interested in fashion. I wasn't particularly interested in fashion then. But it would have been about, right, you know, this all, you know, I'm going to aim high. They can only say no. So that's what I did. I sent a letter off in the autumn term of my 5th year at school. And I was asked to come for an interview. So over the Christmas holidays from school, I went down with my parents and had an interview with the managing editor of Vogue to have 1 week's work experience in June. And I got the gig. And I started there on Monday, the 25th of June, which happened to be my 16th birthday.
I love that. That's so cool, isn't it? So were you one of these who stayed on then till 18 at school, and did you go to uni and stuff?
Yeah, I did. So language and communication has always been my thing. Foreign languages I loved. So my A-levels were French, German and theatre studies, and then I studied French and Italian at university.
Amazing. So do you carry on speaking it when you sort of went into your normal life?
To a degree. I usually found some way to use my languages because I also speak Spanish and some bits and bobs of other things as well. So, for example, I worked at Aston Martin.
All these names you're throwing at us, Helen.
Do you know what? It's so not... It gives an impression that it's so not like me. I'm really down to earth. I'm not like, you know, I haven't had my hair cut by a hairdresser since 2007.
Great.
It's like, I was always meant to not be corporate. I was always meant to own my own business for sure. So please don't think, you know, I don't know, don't get the wrong impression of me that I'm some like uber glam, really put together person, because I'm not. But yeah, so that was it. It was always, for me, it was always about communication, whether that was written or verbal, and also about relationships, because obviously that's what communication is all about.
Yeah, very much.
So I'm the epitome of a people person.
Yeah, no, me too though. Maybe that's why we connected so well. So you've done your degree. You're beautifully versed in languages, which I'm actually a little bit jealous about, because I think I was that wannabe person who always wanted to be able to be speaking other languages fluently. And I did really well in languages, but just really to sort of O level, and then left school. I left school at 16 and I was working by the time I was only 3 months into my 16th year. So I was such a baby. My son's 16 now, so it's so strange to think I was full-time working then. And so I didn't do the uni thing and the kind of academic side of it. So when you left uni, what was the first job then that you went into from there, Helen?
So I went into a trainee PR account executive job. Because I did actually go for an interview at our local paper, but they wanted you to like run a car, your own car, and live on like £6,000 a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was like the 90s, but even then, the sort of your graduate trainee sort of salary would be 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah.
I just thought, no.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if PR was another way that I could write for a living, but I wouldn't need to eat beans on toast for years.
Yeah, so it was better.
Yeah.
PR is a kind of place, isn't it? It's an interesting place, PR. How long did you stay in PR?
So, I mean, after graduating, I did a postgrad marketing and management course for a year, and that was where I learnt about PR. But actually, I ended up going into often marketing. I've worked in every area of the marketing mix. I've been head of marketing and PR. I was head of customer research at Aston Martin for a while. Market research is so not me. That's like all that detail, and
Yeah.
so I took the role in a different direction, made it more sort of training the engineers how to use the information to create better decisions about new models and stuff like that. But anyway, PR, I mean, really, it's like being an in-house journalist in many ways. But I remember starting when I was head of marketing and PR for a computer games company for a little while, and when I started there, it was all young people. We'd go to the pub after work on a Friday. Had a whale of a time, but someone was like, "Oh, PR, isn't that corporate lying?" I was like, "No, it should be the opposite."
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
I think it's like Ab Fab's got a lot to
Answer for, yeah. That's so true. It's great. I did love that, to be fair. So tell us what happens next then. So you're in PR and you're doing all this wonderful work and the brands you've mentioned have been exciting already. I feel like you're still young at this point. I'm like, wow, it's been great. So what happens next?
So I guess a whole load of things came into motion with the kind of financial crisis. So I was made redundant from Aston Martin at the start of the global financial crisis. In a 4-month period, I'd just gone back to Aston Martin to take up the customer research position after leaving there and going to the computer games company. And then I went back to Aston. I'd been there like 4 months. The financial crisis hit, and it's last in, first out.
Yeah.
And then another former employer asked me to come back to a new role, and literally within another couple of months, they realised they too were in the doo-doo, and it was the same. So I was made redundant twice in 4 months.
Oh, it's hard.
So I was literally, whatever. I was a single woman at the time. I had £100,000 mortgage all on me. So I had one lodger already, and my place was a 3-bedroomed apartment. I rented out the other bedroom as well, and I managed to get through 11 months contracting my 2 lodgers without borrowing any money from anyone to get through.
Wonderful.
And then I took a job as assistant to the events director at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And then I've met my other half as a direct result, actually, of being made redundant. So, you know, people, and this is probably really very relevant right now, at the time, being made redundant twice in 4 months seemed like a very, very bad thing. And having to hustle to find the ways to, you know, to cover my bills and stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, as a direct result, I met my other half, and we had, you know, 2 beautiful children who are now 9 and 5.
Amazing.
So if that hadn't have happened, I may never have met him. And I was 35 when we met, 37 when I had my 9-year-old daughter, and 41 when I had my 5-year-old son.
Yeah, so you were an older mum. I mean,
Yeah.
I was an older mum in a way. I was 35 when I had Sam. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, that was definitely in that later section of mums having babies. I was always told I was an at-risk mum by my midwife, which I always appreciated from her, which, you know, it was like, why would you say that to somebody? You know, it scares the life out of you. But it's really interesting. I always think as well, Helen, that if I'd had a baby when I was younger, I'm not sure I would have been quite such a good mum. And I'm not sort of saying I'm this brilliant, wonderful mum, but I feel like I was very comfortable being a mum at that age. And if I'd have been in my, I don't know, my 20s even, I think I would have been terrible at being a mum. You know, I don't think I knew who I was really so much back then. So I don't know if you felt the same, having your children a bit later in life, you know.
Yeah, I do. I think I certainly got all my partying out of the way.
Yeah.
I had a really, really good time for a long time. And therefore I in no way resented giving that up. And I've changed an awful lot as a person since, you know, having the children, as you do. I think it was absolutely the right time and place for me.
Yeah.
And it also directly led to me starting my own business finally.
Great. So how old were you when you finally did that?
So that was 8 years ago. So I'd have been 38. It was a year after my daughter was born, and I didn't want to go back to a corporate role. I'd have had to go back to full time to that role, and I wasn't really that into it anyway. So
Yeah.
I set up a Mandarin Chinese language school.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what? I thought you were going to say, so I set up a communications company, you know, PR, and it's a Mandarin Chinese. I love that. That was a language you never told me you spoke.
Yeah, that's because I don't really speak it very well. But I did employ people who did.
This gets better. This conversation gets better and better. Oh, fantastic. Whatever made you decide that was what you were going to do? There's got to be a story here, Helen.
Yeah, there is. So, you know, I am a linguist. I did a bit of primary school, after school French club teaching after I'd had my daughter, and I kept hearing on the radio and, you know, on news, oh, we don't have enough Mandarin speakers. We're falling behind economically because we don't have enough Mandarin speakers. A lot of people are like, oh, you're amazing. I found languages so hard. And that's because there's a neural pathway in the brain that's open until you're about 10 years old because you're learning your mother tongue.
Yeah.
If you start learning a foreign language before that point, and it's before you start secondary school.
Yes, yeah.
Then that neural pathway stays open in your brain for the rest of your life. So you find it easier to learn foreign languages forever. And I'm one of those people, because we lived in Dubai when I was a child, and I started learning like Arabic at 7 and French at 8. So
my
that's
goodness.
why.
That is such an awesome piece of information that I truly didn't know. Isn't that amazing? So why on earth do we have a curriculum where we start, well, certainly when I was at school, you didn't start your languages till you were in the first year of your senior school, which would have been, what, 11? It might be different now, to be fair. I think Sam did touch on a bit of French when he was younger. But yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, I do wish that I'd learnt my languages as a younger child then, because I think I probably would have pursued it. I really do.
Yeah, it's, foreign languages have got this reputation for being difficult, but that's the reason why.
Yeah.
And only in the last few years, it's now the law that primary schools have to teach one foreign language from key stage 2, so age 7, and that will make a big difference to our children. But so yeah, I thought, okay, Mandarin, that's the time to learn it in primary school. Can't see anyone else really doing this in my area, and I live in Leamington Spa in the
I was going to
Midlands.
ask where you were actually. What a lovely part of the world. Lovely.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I do like it. So that's what I did, but I actually couldn't make a profit from it. I spent 5 years tweaking that business model every which way, taking it online, going into secondary schools as well. And fundamentally, there wasn't enough meat in the sandwich between the Mandarin teachers, who there's not that many of them, and they charge a lot as a result.
Yeah.
And the schools or parents, that there wasn't enough in that equation for me to be a profitable middleman. So so then I thought, okay, I'm gonna wind that business down and start a PR consultancy instead. And that immediately was like, it just felt, it was like a weight off my shoulders. It felt so much easier, like you weren't swimming against the tide anymore. And it was profitable from the outset. Yeah,
wonderful. I love that. So you actually did come back round full circle in the end to where you'd sort of started out, really.
Yeah, I did. And then a couple of months after I started that, an existing client asked me if I would be up for ghostwriting his second book. So he already had an Amazon best-selling book, but he now didn't have the time to write this second book. So I said, yeah, I'd love to. And then that one became a bestseller as well. And then other people started coming to me about ghostwriting, but then also saying, actually, I want to write my book by myself, but I know I need some support and accountability. Do you think you could help me with that? And I thought, well, yeah, I think I can. So that was how the book coaching came about.
It's like this evolution, isn't it? You know, when I listen to your story, that this is what I love, I think, about this entrepreneurial space. You know, these things just seem to evolve so beautifully. And it's interesting, actually, Helen, because obviously I've written a book. I'm also writing a second book, but it's much slower because I've got super busy. I'm not trying to make excuses, but it has gone on the back burner a bit. And I know the sort of process of writing a book for me was such that I needed a writing coach. I did want to write it myself, but I needed a writing coach to help with structure and equally accountability. And so I think, you know, what you're doing is incredible and very needed for anyone who does want to write a book, whether it's you write the book as a ghostwriter or whether it's you help them to write a book. It's massively important that anyone thinking about writing a book, in my opinion, engages with somebody like you. I really think that's important.
I think it's one of those things, just like any big project, it feels like Mount Everest.
Yeah.
And that leads to so many people. I mean, very often when people get in touch with me, they've been thinking about writing a book for months or even years. They might have even started it and got so far and then ground to a halt. And so, working with a book coach, we can help with the structuring the content so that it's right for the audience and it's right for you and where you want this book to take you. and also just breaking it down into manageable chunks.
That's the key. That's the key, because if I had to just write the book, it was the Everest, it was the mountain. Whereas if you say, right, we're going to focus on chapter 1 or this section or whatever it looks like, that was exactly how I wrote my book. It had 3 sections. I actually wrote section 2 first.
Yeah.
Then I wrote section 3, and then I wrote section 1, which, and that really surprised me. But I was very open to going with the flow of how I needed to write this book, which was quite fascinating, Helen. Because I would have thought I would have had to have written it from the start and right through, and I really didn't have to do that. It's really something going through that journey, I think.
It is, and I think it often surprises clients to learn that we always tend to write the introduction and the conclusion last.
Yes.
Because the meat of the book might change how those look by the end, So so it's, that is something that people are often like, oh, so I don't start with the introduction. No, you do that last.
Yeah, it's fascinating, so fascinating. I'm sure I could talk to you about books for a very long time, Helen. But tell us about you. So we talked in the beginning that you are a brand strategist, a book coach, and also the ghostwriting. How's that split in terms of how you do your business?
So, as you say, it's an evolution, and it came about. So my business was the content doc, but then I became founding partner in the BizBook Foundry with Catherine Williams, who's
yes,
lovely Catherine.
And Catherine's been on our podcast.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, a long time ago, but she is in the episodes there. You will find her.
Yeah, she did. She told me she did. So you will know that. So she's a book layout designer, which in old money was known as the typesetter.
Yeah.
So she, in her own words, she makes books beautifully easy to read.
I love that.
So I help with the writing. She helps with the design and production side of things. But then, with the other part of my business, I noticed that. My ideal customer is a woman, and that's not to say that I don't have fabulous customers who are men, but my passion is for helping women to tell their stories.
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, I think they need a little bit more help to do so often in terms of suffering from a lack of confidence, which I can give. I'm quite a nurturing person, and I can help them to feel more confident about that. And when I say that, I noticed that these fabulous women were coming to me for help with a book, and many of them have, they might have MBEs or OBEs, and they were saying the same thing to me, which was, Helen, I'm not sure anyone will want to read this. I'm like, really?
It's so true, isn't it? It's so true. Yeah.
So what I realised was many of my ladies had similarities, and they often were on the cusp of selling a successful business, or they'd just done it, or they'd stepped away from a high-profile corporate role, and they thought, right, I'll write that book now. But what they actually needed was they needed help to build a personal brand to serve as a platform through which they could sell their hard-won knowledge to, tell their story and inspire others profitably. And a book is part of that often, but it's not all of it. And if you don't have that audience built already, your book will fall flat. And I don't want that to happen. I want my, if you're going to spend money with me, having my help with your book, I want to make sure that it sells and that people read it.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was how her next chapter came about, because you need to get, and the reason that these women who are often very successful, they struggle because before, when they were in their successful company or in their corporate role, they had a team around them and they didn't have a personal brand.
Yeah.
Now they find themselves, they often have 5 to 10 years of working life left, because that's when they want to wind things up and they want to make maximum impact, but they don't know where to start. Now it's just them. They feel a lack of confidence about creating that personal brand as well. So that led me to set up Her Next Chapter for those women who are at that kind of crossroads and they're thinking about a book, but actually, well, let's think about this holistically and help you to build a platform through which you can create the maximum impact and build your legacy. Not just write a book and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Isn't that great? It really is. I mean, it's the big picture stuff, isn't it, ultimately? And so can I work with you, how do you work, one-to-one, or is it groups, or do you have different sort of variants of how you work with people, Helen?
Yes, I have the kind of purely book offerings still under Her Next Chapter. The Her Next Chapter signature program is over a year. It includes book coaching, but we go through all the groundwork to work out who you want to serve, how you can best serve them, and how you're going to monetize that. And then, my clients have the accountability to execute that over the course of a year. And also they have the book coaching too. So it's pretty intensive, but, I want these women to make as much impact as they can. They deserve to do so.
I think there's another thing about this. The perception can be that you write a book and suddenly it's a bestseller, or you write a book and suddenly you make lots of money. And actually the reality is you are forever marketing a book. And also I've found with my book, it's been a wonderful business card, if you like. It's been an additional value to speaking events. It's additional value to any coaching I do. It's always that added value piece for me, my book, as opposed to it being this one thing that sells and makes me rich. And I think it's quite important to talk about that, really, when you talk about book publishing, because whilst you can look at the Harry Potter lady and say, well, it made her very rich, she is kind of quite a minority, really, isn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
So.
One of the first things we ever say to potential clients is you will not make a lot of money from direct sales. What you will do is, as you say, you'll be able to use your business book as a fantastic business card. If you want to build your credibility and position yourself as an expert in your sector, this is a great way to do that. But really, this is one of the lowest rungs on that value ladder of services, and that's what Her Next Chapter helps women to create.
Yeah.
So
I also work on value ladder with my sales coaching, so it's all really very connected, isn't it, Helen? So, and
yes.
It's exactly how I position it. It's really one of the bottom rungs of that value ladder, but it's still important and it's still part of that ladder. And the ladder's there for a reason, isn't it? You can't just have one step on a value ladder because it's not as effective. So I love this. We're very aligned. It's really, really nice. I also want to just check in on the connection then back to Catherine with the business you run with her. So how does that fit into sort of people who work with you, Helen?
So the idea for the BizBook Foundry was, Catherine and I met through a small business marketing community, Andrew and Pete's Atomic Community.
I know it, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that they really recommend is that everyone has an accountability partner. So I think Catherine actually approached me because we joined at about the same time. And obviously we were a perfect fit. I was like the writing a book woman and she was the designing the book woman. And then after we worked together for about a year, I said to her, Catherine, I keep like having prospects and clients come to me and say, but how much will it cost in its entirety to self-publish my book? And I was a bit like, not really my specialism, and there are so many variables, it's hard for me to say. But speak to Catherine. And Catherine was, funnily enough, having people come to her and say, well, I haven't written my book yet, but what's involved and how much would it cost? And so anyway, so I suggested to her in April last year, well, why don't we create a complete solution for self-publishing business book authors from idea to final files? Because there are two issues. One is the cost was not transparent. People would have to find out how much it would cost. Usually with our service, there are an average of 7 different people's skill sets involved. Well, many authors don't know the different skill sets they'd need to access.
No, quite.
And even when they find out, which takes time, then they have to work out, well, is this person any good? So we've done that work for people. So that's what it is, really. Idea to final files, which we'll even upload to Amazon or Ingram Spark for print on demand or as ebooks, whatever it might be.
Yeah, amazing.
So, and that came up, I think this is the thing, isn't it? When you develop products, listen to your clients.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you that most people come not really knowing who they need to help them, but what they do know is that they just want to publish a book. So actually that is, as you say, idea to final files. And Ingram Sparks is actually the company that print my book. So, and I used a slightly different option where I used a hybrid publisher. So, but also similar, because actually I had a writing coach separate to the hybrid publisher. And so I just had two sort of different people who probably did the 7 things, if that makes sense, Helen. But yes. I wouldn't have known what I needed, particularly. I love what you've done with Catherine. I love Catherine. Obviously, I've only just met you, but you're just as adorable at the moment. Our conversation, I'm loving it. And I think it's such a nice thing to come together like that when you just have those same values and those lovely skills that just come together beautifully. It's great. It's great to hear that you've done that. And obviously, in the comments on the podcast, I'll put all the links that you want me to put. So if we want to link off to that business as well, we will do. It's absolutely fine, because I'd like the listeners to find you if they need you. That's amazing. How can people get hold of you? What's the best way, Helen? Where do you hang out? And I'll put the links, but where do you hang out?
I think my primary social media channel is LinkedIn. I put a lot of free content on there. And I'd also like to offer a free guide to business messaging, which is called The Mystery of the Muddled Message.
Oh, I like that. Now, is that called alliteration? Am I trying to be clever, or is it not quite
that? It totally
is. Oh, I feel so clever there for a minute. I love that.
So yeah, I think that causes a lot of businesses massive problems when they just can't get clear on their message. And that's one of the things that the ladies who I work with often, again, when they go from working for a company to it just being them, they're like really struggle to get a clear message. So that I'll give you the link to that. That's in my member vault.
Great, wonderful. No, that's really good, because there's some real value there for our listeners right away. That's so kind of you, Helen. And I just love what you're doing. I know you have mentioned that predominantly you want to work with women, so I know that the message is very much for female entrepreneurs who may have already just sold a business from what you've told me, but equally they may be successful and have had a big corporate career. And that transition is so interesting, isn't it? From being very successful in corporate to suddenly running your own business. Such a different dynamic, which always fascinates me. And I love that you're supporting those women who are obviously very talented to then continue that journey as entrepreneurs and running their own businesses. That's wonderful, and hopefully producing a book on the back of it as well. So that's really awesome. I want your final thoughts, Helen. You don't know I'm going to ask you this because I always just drop this on my guests because I kind of want that spontaneous thing. You know, what is that one thing you want to tell people if you're talking to them and you want to give them that wise advice from what you've learned in life?
I think, so this really surprised a podcast host. I think last year I did an interview and this really surprised him. I think I would say money is important. And anyone who knows me will know I'm not very materialistic at all. But I was brought up in a family where talking about money was seen as slightly vulgar and distasteful. And what I'm telling my children is money gives you choices.
Yeah.
And by that, the reason I mention that is because so many women I work with don't want to price their services. They're not pitching them at the right level, and it's all about imposter syndrome. And if I don't charge this much, if I only charge a little bit, then if it goes wrong, it won't matter. No, you need to charge what you're worth. Please do.
Love that. I love that. And I'm actually probably more that I talk about the value you give in order for you to feel you can charge that price. But it's a similar message. But I probably don't talk about the money bit up front. But I lost a business where I just literally lost everything overnight. And I think that's my reason why money is one of those things that I shy away from, if that makes sense. Because I always think, you know, when I ran that business, my ultimate was I would be a millionaire. That was we're going to be millionaires, you know. Whereas now when I run this business, I run it because I love running it and I love the work I do. And so actually my mindset's different. But I do believe that your message is actually really important. I really, really do. And I thank you for saying it, because I wouldn't necessarily be that person who would speak up about it. But I think it's a really great message. I think it is about what you're worth and you understanding what your value is, and not feeling like that money bit is the dirty bit. Because if you build all the stuff before it, the relationship, the value, the trust, you know, the fact that you are really going to help me to do something I want to do, often price goes out the window anyway, because it's actually about them getting that solution that they want. So, oh gosh, I could talk to you for a long time, Helen. I love that. So thank you for that message. It's great. It's a really great message. And I've loved our chat, our human conversation. I hope you have too.
I have. It's been a blast. And crikey, where has, 45 minutes gone?
It is easy to fill, isn't it, with me? I chat away. But thank you. And I really hope the listeners have enjoyed your wonderful journey from Vogue to Aston Martin with PR and business book coaching and personal branding, and obviously ghostwriting if you want a bit of that too. It's all really, really interesting. You've been fascinating as a guest. So thank you for joining me. And listeners, if you want to get in touch with Helen, do it. Do not think about it. Just do it. The links are all in the podcast. Connect with this lady and just follow her on LinkedIn for a while if that's how you want to do it. But this lady knows her stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed our human conversation today. I love making my podcast with amazing guests. And please do subscribe and like on the channel that you listen to: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher and SoundCloud, all my S's. And you can watch our beautiful faces on YouTube, because I will publish it on there as well. But for now, thanks for listening to The Human Conversation, and we'll see you again really soon. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.